real conversations, and some hard truths. Gangs, drugs, and guns. Giving a voice to those willing to sacrifice. We have stories that need to be told. We have lessons that need to be taught. Protect and serve. Welcome to The Quiet Professional. Hey everybody, welcome back. Nathan Romas with you. Today we have some big topics of justice and bail reform that we're going to get to. For that, I have the Minister of Justice for the province of Alberta, Mickey Amery, on the show. Minister Amery was sworn in on June 9th, 2023, after serving as the Minister of Children's Services. Prior to service as an elected official, he was a practicing lawyer and business owner in Calgary, Alberta, and he worked on cases of national significance in the areas of Aboriginal law and consumer protection. Minister Amery holds a bachelor's degree in political science, a bachelor's in economics, and a Juris Doctorate degree in law. He has a wife and 3 children that he finds time for, and among doing all these other things. So happy to have you here today, Minister.
Well, thank you very much for having me. I'm very much looking forward to our conversation today.
Yeah, I'm glad we could get you in. And I was saying just offline, and I'll say to the audience, just in case my voice is probably going to sound weird to them today, because you're used to hearing it a certain way, but I'm fighting a crazy head cold right now. But there was no way I would cancel. So the magic of Zoom and the internet, we can do this and don't have to worry about being in person.
Hey, you're coming through loud and clear on my end. And, the magic of Zoom really does allow us to do this pretty much anywhere. So
Yeah.
it'll be fun.
I kind of want to start just talking about you and just, if we can, talk about maybe growing up, some life experiences. But what I'd like to really get to is kind of what brought you into the world of conservative politics. And, usually for people, they kind of have certain life experiences, or maybe their parents have a big influence. But if you could talk about yourself growing up and how you got into this world.
Yeah, wonderful topic. So born and raised in Calgary, Alberta. I'm an Alberta boy through and through. I am the son of parents who immigrated to Canada in the 1970s, and they came from a small country in the Middle East called Lebanon. So they immigrated to Alberta. We've spent our entire lives here, for most of their lives, and all of mine certainly. Growing up in a predominantly newcomer family was interesting because it posed some of the challenges that we typically see and hear about. Some of the things with challenges to language, or challenges to kind of understanding the societal issues. I think was an interesting way of growing up, because we had the perspective as children of those immigrant parents. We had the perspective of being able to really understand things from two very different worlds, I would say. And so that was an interesting way of growing up. But it also, I think, added a significant layer, if you will, to my upbringing. And it allowed me to see and hear about things that we typically would not have heard about otherwise. The opportunity to see different parts of the world, the opportunity to see how things really worked well here, and the challenges that my parents faced in growing up in an environment and in a country where we don't have the typical freedoms and the typical opportunities, I guess, if you will, to do the things that we're all able to do here. But it was very important to me, and I think that held to me very closely, near and dear. I remember hearing about some of the the ways that governments across the world operate, and learning about that somewhat firsthand gave me a unique perspective into how grateful many people are when they come to Canada, including my parents and myself. And I think that just being able to grow up in an environment like that gave me a very, very unique and I think advantageous perspective when it came to going into politics. Now, politics is another interesting topic, because I come from a family that has very much been involved in the conservative movement for a very long time. My father first became involved with the Progressive Conservative Party in the early 80s. and ran in the 1986 and 1989 provincial elections unsuccessfully. He then continued on, and he used to always say third time's a charm. And he ran in the 1993 election as the progressive conservative candidate, and he was very successful in that particular election under the Ralph team. He continued on for 6 consecutive terms. I'm very proud of that. He served this province with integrity for many, many years. And we grew up in a household that was very much a conservative household. It very much also aligned with some of the ideologies that my parents had brought with them, and some of that I think are very important. And one of those is really being responsible government, responsible to the people, accountable to the constituents, and making sure that whatever we do in a manner that we would do within our own homes. And that's really where my conservative ideologies lie. If I'm going to do something, I want it to be something that I would typically do for myself as well.
Hmm.
If I'm going to approve a project or a spend or whatever that may be, I need it to embody what I would do in my own personal budget. And I think that's really important to note, because I think it forms the basis for all of my conservative values. If we're going to do something, it must be done in a way that is fiscally responsible and effective and efficient. And I think all of those things can be achieved if you take the time to really look at what you're trying to do. So, there are any number of different areas that one might characterize as being, sort of conservative values. And I really would like all the viewers to hear and listen when I say that, when it comes to fiscal management, prudent management, fiscal conservatives, and being responsible with the public purse, that first and foremost forms the basis of my political ideologies. And I think I try to embody that in everything that I do.
Well, I think, yeah, you bring up a good point there, and that's a big topic, especially nowadays. Is where are dollars being spent? And I mean, it gets asked throughout time, but I think that's a real big focus nowadays. Is where exactly is every dollar going, right down to the penny? It's like, is the accountability there? Are we spending it? We're getting the best bang for the buck, I guess. Um, and you blew my mind right off the top when you said that you're Lebanese. With the name Mickey and you have fire red hair, people would never guess that you're from Middle East background. Are you like both parents are from Lebanon?
Yeah, full parents were born and raised in Lebanon. But look, I like to say this, and that part of the world saw a number of different peoples over the past centuries and millennia. And the truth of the matter is, it just goes to show you how small this world truly is. Many different types of people have been through that area. Many different types
Yeah.
of cultures and customs and traditions, and everything else under the sun has really come through that area. And so, probably somewhere back in the lineage, there's probably some Scottish or Irish background. I don't know. But as far as I can tell you, both parents were born and raised in Lebanon. So I was able to learn the language. I was able to, you know, uh, speak it fluently. I can read and write at a, more basic level, I guess. But certainly, again, it has given me an appreciation for being able to uh, understand, firstly, some of the different customs, and some of the different ideas that come from abroad, and also to sympathize with it and make sure that
Hmm.
whatever I do also embodies, in addition to that financial component, but also embodies a considering the views of people from elsewhere, and making sure that their views are adequately respected and represented as well.
Do you find in all your travels that a lot of people that come, maybe first generation, maybe second, but especially those newcomers, are they generally conservative in your experiences, or do you find that they come over and they're more liberal?
No, I certainly and genuinely believe that most newcomers are conservative in nature. What that means is this: every newcomer family that I've ever had an encounter with has been fiscally conservative, meaning that they didn't either have the luxury nor do they have the desire to spend frivolously. Immigrant families have to be very careful about what they do because a lot of them have come to Canada with very little, and I think that's important to keep in mind. Family is a huge thing, and family, both in the conservative movement and in immigrant families, is I think a fundamental and key component. So for me, you mentioned earlier, I've got these three wonderful kids, and I try to find time for them, but I also want to make sure that every decision that I'm fortunate enough to make is something that they can hold their head up high and make sure that they can defend it in the future. And I want to be able to do the same thing.
Yeah.
So when it comes to the fiscal responsibility, when it comes to faith, when it comes to family, I call them the three F's, and I spoke about them for years now. But those three F's are really that basis for conservative values, and they also embody what I think the vast majority of Albertans, both from here and those who have come here very recently, embody in their own lives. So yes, absolutely, and that's why I would say to you, Nathan, that when I talk about conservative values and we attribute them to those three F's: family, faith, and fiscal responsibility. I think that all of those describe the vast majority of Albertans to a T.
Well, and I think, yeah, you have a good point there. It's hard to find, at least on social media and all the headlines nowadays, people that are forward looking like that and think, okay, what are my kids going to think of me in the future, and what are they going to say about the decisions that I made? I find that's kind of what attracts me more to the conservative values, and whereas nowadays a lot of people are just um, kind of about self gratification. They just want the quick satisfaction. It's like no time is spent on kind of looking into the future. So that too is something that kind of speaks to me. Same with the three F's that you're talking about. Um, just before we do get on to justice and bail reform, I did want to ask too, and this is just like a personal question, but it's um, when it comes to the provincial and the federal side of politics, how much overlap is there? How much talking goes on back and forth between the two? Because sometimes you see federal politicians or provincial ones, they'll echo each other across party lines. But sometimes if you look at like the NDP party, a lot of people think like the Alberta NDP is very different than the BC one, and then they're very different than the federal level. But when I look at the conservative side, it seems like a more consistent theme throughout. Like they're kind of echoing the same message and delivering the same message. So, uh, how much back and forth is there, federal to provincial?
Well, excellent question once again, and one that really takes a lot of thought to talk about. I think what you mentioned in your comments is really important to highlight, and that is that the consistency that Albertans and indeed Canadians have when it comes to the conservative movement is almost uniform all across the country. We advocate for the same social programs and the same opportunities and the same advantages that many parties do. And I think that what really differentiates us from other parties is the ability to take the time to ask the question of why. Now, there's a lot of people that will tell you what they need and what they want, and there's a lot of initiatives that are developed through the various ministries and departments where a need is identified, but very few people start asking the question of why. Why are we spending this much money?
Yeah.
And specifically, what is it going to achieve? And are those dollars being allocated in the best way possible? I think that's incredibly important because what you'll see consistently throughout the country is every party makes a number of promises. And I think that the difference between a party like the Conservative Party, and that this is consistent all across Canada, or another party like a left leaning party, is that we also ask the question of why. Uh, you know, why are we doing this? And what are we going to get out of it? And I think those are very important questions for every single thing we do. Are we getting the best bang for our buck when it comes to spending public money? Is there a better way of doing this? Why did you come up with this particular idea? Right.
Yeah.
And far too often, what we see in other areas of the country are provinces that are slowly but surely getting themselves into a serious financial situation. By that I mean that that the ideas, which all sound pretty good, are being implemented without any consideration as to the why. Once again, are we should we be doing this? Is it going to impact our future generations? Who is going to carry the burden of this project or this idea or this initiative? And if we don't do that, what happens ultimately, and what you see in all other areas of our province that don't have, fiscally conservative governments, is you'll see that over time, over generations, over any number of years, what you'll find is that when things become too difficult to handle when it comes to government finances, there's only really two ways of dealing with it, and that's looking at massive cuts or significant tax increases, both of which are less than ideal. The one massive cuts mean less social programs for the population.
Mhm.
People tend to leave. More taxes mean that people are disincentivized from coming to that particular province. And so what you see then is this vicious cycle of what sort of transpires. When a province is very unattractive to move or invest in, I think that what you see is a reduced or decreasing tax base. And the advantage that we really have here in Alberta and in other conservative provinces is that the investment and the people are going exactly there. And you see the tremendous amount of demand for people coming to Alberta. There's a reason for that. There's a specific reason for that. People know that if they come to Alberta, they're going to be able to live in a province with the highest average incomes in the country, the lowest taxes, and the best environment for businesses to invest in. And again, that creates a very positive cycle, right? More investment in this province means more jobs, which means more higher wages, and things are continuing on as they have been for many years. We had a little hiccup from 2015 to 2019,
Yeah.
where billions of dollars of debt and hundreds of thousands of jobs were chased away from this province. But we're right back on track. I think things are looking really great in this province, and I'm tremendously proud to be here.
Yeah, well, I'm originally from Manitoba, and I know when I go back home and I buy anything, I go for a meal and it's like an extra $3 or $4 on it. And you're like, wow, I'm never buying anything in another province again. I just come to Alberta.
I've got a sister that lives in Ontario. She lives in London, Ontario, and same issue goes. I love
Yeah.
her to death. And love visiting her, but I just don't see. I wouldn't spend a whole lot of money over there because I'd rather spend it here in Alberta.
Yeah. So with our time left, I want to make sure we get some good depth on these topics here. So we got justice and bail reform. Maybe kind of talking on the bail side of things just to start. So we had the recent Bill C-48 go through. We had some changes to the bail reform. We don't have to get into the small details of that. I would hope people go out and read about it, especially on the law enforcement side. They should know about it. But can you talk a bit about some of the change in protocol for the bail side of things within the province? And on that, can you also explain where the differentiation between federal and provincial, I guess, jurisdiction on this issue is? Because I know feds have some say in it, but how much does the province control? How much does the province get to have a say and make change on this issue?
Okay, perfect. Thank you for that. So I'll start off by sort of talking a little bit about the division of powers when it comes to this area. The federal government is certainly responsible and retains jurisdiction for dealing over matters relating to the criminal code, and certainly within their jurisdiction is the ability to influence the bail system here in Canada. I want to take you back here, Nathan, just a little bit back, a little bit before my time, but an important thing to note. And that is going back to 2019 with the federal government's decision to introduce Bill C-75.
Yeah.
Bill C-75 was an act to amend the Criminal Code, Youth Criminal Justice Act, and other acts. And it was described as a way of trying to help alleviate some of the pressures on the criminal justice system. And it was masked as a move to help provinces deal with the burden of dealing with a growing criminal justice system by introducing something called the principle of restraint.
Hmm.
What that means, it requires any peace officer or judicial officer making a decision regarding the release of an accused to give primary consideration to the release of that accused at the earliest possible opportunity. And again, in addition to that, on the least onerous conditions that are appropriate in the circumstances. And so that set the stage for all the problems I think that we've been encountering lately, and that is what a lot of people refer to as the catch and release program or the
Yeah.
crime initiatives. This was all directed and prompted by our federal counterparts. It did not work, and I think that every single province in this country and the territories had urged our federal government to revisit this because it simply wasn't working. In January of 2023, I think this is really important. All Canadian premiers from the 13 provinces and territories signed a letter to Prime Minister Justin Trudeau, urging that the federal government take immediate action to strengthen Canada's bail system because we saw that this was a real problem. Now I'll come back to what you were talking about a little bit later on, and that is Bill C-48, which was again another act to amend the criminal code, and it was essentially aimed at bail reform. This creates what's called a reverse onus. So if somebody is charged with some particular crime, and those are outlined in Bill C-48, the onus will shift from the Crown proving or trying to prove that that individual accused should not be released to an onus on that individual to actually prove why that individual should, in fact, be released. And so it's a reverse onus system. This is, I think, probably a more effective way of dealing with some of those serious and repeat offenders. And I think it will bring what we've talked about as common sense change to the bail reform system. Now, of course, it is brand new. This was just recently passed and received a royal assent. So we don't know exactly how it's going to be, what kind of an impact or how it's going to be handled by our judicial officials. But I certainly think that we're cautiously optimistic. We always say that we're cautiously optimistic. Any bail reform in the right direction is a good reform, and we're certainly going to be monitoring that very carefully to make sure that high risk offenders and repeat offenders are kept out of our communities and behind bars.
Well, and on that, I know there's a component in there when a justice or JP goes and releases somebody, they have to speak to why they release them. And I might not be saying the exact terms or something, but it's something along those lines. One of the big things I know from at least frontline members is, the ones who deal with the repeat offenders out there, and they always wonder, where's the accountability on the back end of the system? So judges, JPs, even Crown, if they're throwing things out or saying, hey, we're not going ahead with this case. So I like that there's a component there. Are you able to explain at all, like what kind of accountability comes out of that? So like if somebody makes a decision to release someone and they go, the offender goes out and commits the same crime again or whatever happens, does that come back on anybody at any point? Because I get that they can't like foresee the future and they're going based on the law, but does anything ever happen like, hey, you've been wrong 5 out of 6 times, you don't have a good batting average here, so something's going to change?
Yeah, and that's I love the way that you put that, and I wanted to talk about there's a few layers here that I just want to address. When it comes to accountability of the Crown Prosecution Service, we're certainly regularly monitoring what is happening within the Alberta Crown Prosecution Service. And my role as the Attorney General for the province of Alberta gives me the ability to introduce protocols or measures or policies that might help our Crown prosecutors handle these issues. One of the things, and I think it overlaps with a little bit of your question earlier, and that is sort of what is the overlap between the two, the province and the federal government. One of the things that we'd have direct ability to work on are the positions that prosecutors take. And in September of 2023, I introduced something called the bail practice protocol, and it was essentially, or changes to the bail practice protocol, I should say, which essentially provided guidance to prosecutors to seek the detention of accused individuals, in particular repeat violent offenders, when the public safety is at risk, unless the risk of that can be addressed by other bail conditions. A component of that was that if a prosecutor was assessing a matter and decided not to seek um, the continued detention of an individual, that prosecutor would have to provide notes and reasons as to why that individual prosecutor did not wish to proceed with the instructions on the bail practice protocol. I can tell you right now. I mean, I've been practicing law for more than 12 years. Um, and I've had the opportunity to work in various areas. I can tell you right now that the defense bar here in Alberta is somewhat astounded at the hardline position that our crown prosecutors are taking. And I say this with a little bit of a smile on my face because I have to say to you that where appropriate, I think that if our crown prosecutors are developing a reputation that they will not consent to the release of a serious or violent repeat offender or somebody that's committed some serious domestic violence or intimate partner violence or crimes, I think that it would be appropriate for our prosecutors to take a strong position when it comes to that.
Yeah.
Now, when we talk about our judiciary, we first and foremost, I want to make sure to stress that our system of government ensures that the judiciary is an independent branch of the judiciary essentially operates as an independent branch. But I do believe that for the large part that judges do their absolute best to interpret the law, that they are using the tools that have been given to them by the federal and provincial government, and that they are applying the law as it should be applied. The problem really stems here, and I have no problem saying this. The problem really stems with the laws that the judiciary are asked to interpret. And that is the problem here. When you have bills like C-75, which mandate the principle of restraint, as I talked about earlier, which tells a judicial officer that you must make a decision with with that in mind of the accused, to find a way to release that accused at the earliest reasonable opportunity. Sorry, and on the least onerous conditions. Well, that creates a real problem for our serious and violent criminals because they no longer take the issues of bail decisions seriously. And many of them have learned far too quickly that they should not expect to see them remanded for until trial and that they can continue to do what they've been doing.
Yeah.
So the reputation, I think, really focuses, the reputation of our criminal justice system really stems on the issue of what are we doing as politicians to empower our judiciary and our prosecutors and everybody involved in dealing with this in an appropriate way. And I can tell you right now, I'm not convinced that the federal government has given the judiciary the tools they need.
Yeah. And you know what? One of the things that has come up recently, and I just had part of the discussion with someone else on this podcast, was just how you can have a criminal warrant in another province, and it could be for serious offenses. And all you got to do is just go to the next province, and it's not executable. You're not getting shipped back. So a lot of the people are avoiding accountability in that respect, or in that way, just by going across provincial lines. I mean, we've had people with warrants out of Manitoba. We had one in particular, Manitoba, Saskatchewan, and BC, and they were in Alberta. And I kind of maybe hoping this is like another project for you or something down the road. But looking at dealing with people, especially with Zoom or however we can do it, if you have criminal warrants, you're not getting away from that, right? Because the criminal is across Canada. I can understand if it was like provincial, we give a ticket or something. Okay, the other province doesn't want to deal with that. But holding these people accountable, and a lot of them can be for some serious offenses. We've had people with robbery, firearms offenses, just go to the next province and nothing's being done to you. No one's going to pay to ship you back. So I think there's a lot of different ways that we can look at holding people accountable. I think a lot of it comes down to the policy side. I mean, you make a good point, and very rarely do I see maybe the political side taking ownership of that, but I appreciate that very much. Um, yeah, so I think that's a big thing that as frontline officers, kind of want to see a change in. We definitely do like the changes that have happened. Uh, if you're kind of done on that point, I didn't know if you wanted to say anything else.
No, I just wanted to emphasize the importance of what you're saying and how little the provinces and perhaps the federal government have taken in the way of initiatives to sort of link up all of the provinces in a with a way of communicating with one another to help identify some of
Yeah,
the challenges said. I also want to say that I'm very much aware of and very sympathetic to some of the frustrations that our frontline law enforcement agencies are experiencing. And in particular, it is that process of laying an arrest or laying a charge and finding that individual right back on the streets the very next day, rinse and repeat. And that's incredibly frustrating to both me and I think the vast majority of law enforcement officers in this province. Again, we're doing everything we can. We're on the horn all the time. We're shouting from the rooftops about how bail reform needs to change. And eventually, I think there's really the feds will have no choice but to start hearing us out and hearing the rest of the provinces. We're all unanimously complaining about the same issue.
yeah, yeah, 100%. One of the things we'll talk about here, just on the justice side, and some of the changes there. These teams of prosecutors that are supposed to be going, I guess they're going between Edmonton and Calgary. They're based out of the two major cities, and they have a focus on violent crime. So you can talk a bit about how that's going to work and what exactly are they targeting when we say violent crime? Is it like linked to organized crime or gang stuff, or is it just all violence? So if it's gang and domestic violence, what exactly are they doing and focused on?
Yeah, certainly. So what we thought about was again going back to some of our discussions about efficiencies. We thought about how can we empower our crown prosecutors to deal with problem offenders in the quickest and most efficient way possible. And what it really stems down to is that prosecutors were spending a lot of time learning about an individual file, learning about the accused, studying the patterns, trying to figure out how to deal with an individual best. I thought it was very helpful to focus on particular areas and allocate specific prosecutors who could do nothing but prosecutions in a particular geographic area. I'll tell you why I think that's important. First and foremost, you become very familiar with the people who are involved because repeat offenders, their names come up all the time. The other thing that's equally important is having a prosecutor know the geography and the neighborhood that they're dealing with
Hmm.
is very, very helpful when it comes to issues like bail and it comes to issues like describing and detailing the evidence for judges. If a prosecutor is dealing with those same streets and neighborhoods and sort of hangouts that these repeat offenders are at, prosecutors are very quick at becoming really good at what they do once they do it over and over again. And I thought it didn't make sense to have a file randomly allocated to a prosecutor based on other factors when we have this really obvious advantage in trying to get our prosecutors to become really familiar with the communities that they prosecute. And so that's exactly what we've decided to do. We know that downtown Calgary and downtown Edmonton are hotbeds for the types of violent and serious crimes that we talk about. And you asked about some of those, and I think you really got a bunch of them. The serious gang related crimes, the serious assaults, the serious drug offenses, um, intimate partner violence, which I think is focused on those who have been previously discharged for an offense, and other violent crimes that I think we all pretty much are well aware of. Those are the types of crimes that our individual prosecution teams will be prosecuting. What's more is that they'll also speak to bail for these offenders as well,
Hmm.
be involved in early stages of the prosecutions, and in many of these circumstances, the trial of these individuals. So having that consistency and having that stability within our Crown Prosecution Service, having them be able to prosecute in a particular area, I think will yield remarkable advantages. And keep in mind one other thing, Nathan, I think it's really important to note is that what we've simply done is we've done a reallocation of prosecutors to these areas. And so it's not like we have, you know, taken prosecutors away from one area or one type of issue and put them into another. No, the prosecutors have simply been restructured. And so we're going to have the same exact amount of prosecutors performing this important work all across the province. The last thing I'll say to you is this: the the Crown Prosecution Service here in Alberta is operating under a historic low vacancy rate of under 3% right now. And I think this is truly a testament. By the way, this is probably the envy of all government departments, but certainly it is a testament to the support and the close work that our department has been doing with the Crown Prosecution in making sure that workplace conditions and the balance between their caseloads and the type of work that they do and all other factors as well respected so that they can continue to do an excellent job for this province.
Yeah, well, and you know what? I think it's good having these discussions like this because even from the front end or front line perspective, knowing what the prosecutors might need, I think there needs to be better communication. We can certainly up that, and have if something doesn't go ahead, the reasons why it didn't go ahead, having a little more communication in there with the officers and saying, hey, we need these certain things ahead of time, or while you're doing your investigation. I think that's a big component to it is the communication. We're just coming up to the end of our time here.
Can I jump in here
Yeah.
really quickly? Because I think there's something else that's just absolutely phenomenal that is being developed by our justice officials in the Crown Prosecution Service, and that is our pre-charge assessment office. And I just wanted to explain what that is and what it's intended to do. What we're doing is, and we're working with a number of police detachments right now across the province in a pilot program, but the pre-charge assessment office is intended to achieve exactly what you just described. It is a team of prosecutors who are going to be working hand in hand with the various police detachments in this province to review a matter very early in its onset, very early in a criminal complaint matter. The prosecutors and the police officers will be working together for any number of reasons. The first reason is to review the evidence from the Crown prosecution's perspective to determine whether there's a reasonable likelihood of conviction. I think that's very important because we don't want to subject people to lengthy and ongoing and expensive court proceedings where the evidence doesn't support a conviction. But we also want to make sure that the Crown prosecutors weigh in at the very early stages of a charge or of an arrest to make sure that the evidence is all there. The pre-charge assessment office is also going to be tasked with looking at the quality of the evidence as well. And going back to our law enforcement agencies and saying, hey, look, maybe we should shore up this area, or it looks like your disclosure package is missing a video here, or maybe there's a charter notice that we need to be aware of in the
Mhm.
future, and they can flag these things from a very early onset. What we've seen in the pilots is that it results in a tremendous amount of resource savings. And that means that police officers and prosecutors are working hand in hand to deliver a file that is of far better quality and far more complete than it's ever been in the history of this province. This is going to change everything when it comes to the quality of our prosecutions, and it will not bog down our prosecutors with cases that, for example, do not have the evidence for a conviction or simply don't make sense to prosecute fully. There are so many good things coming along this with this Justice Department. I'm very, very excited about it, and I know that it's going to translate into tangible and real impacts for Albertans.
Awesome. Well, you actually beat me to it because I usually end with, "Hey, anything coming down the pipeline, any new projects or anything." So there you have it. um,
Well, that's a big one. I know that I know you know a little bit about the body cams, and I
yeah.
think that's important as well. And it's important in two areas, really. It's important for police officers to record their encounters with individuals, and it's, I think, equally, if not more important, to protect those police officers from the various allegations that we see as well. Police officers will have the proof right on their uniforms, and I think that that's going to speak volumes as to how professional and how um, composed our police officers are in the encounters that they have to deal with. So that's going to be a wonderful one. The pre-charge
Mhm.
assessment is going to be great, and I will promise you this: I will take away what you mentioned earlier with respect to coordinating with other provinces as it relates to outstanding warrants and other information as well.
Yeah, I appreciate that. One of the things I did kind of want to get into, if we can, was just about communicating with the public and just what exactly, like, who's responsible for which step along the process. And you kind of brought it up a bit earlier, and you were talking about, like, the policy, the lawmaking is um, a bit of the issue to blame for certain aspects. Usually in social media, people just say, "Well, why do the cops keep releasing somebody?" But I'm wondering, like, how does the justice side of things decide? We're going to put something out there or explain things to the public. Where do you best do that through, even? Because I don't have an answer, but I'm kind of looking for a solution. Like, how are we communicating to the public? Maybe even students in school. Who's responsible for what? How does this whole system work? And how can we kind of work better together? So, I don't know if you got kind of want to take an answer or shot at an answer on that.
Yeah, absolutely. It's always a challenge when we read in the media a sensationalized um, headline, and the media likes to make things very interesting for its readers. Uh, Oftentimes, there are certain things that are well aware to a prosecutor or a police officer involved in a particular case or matter that does not make it public. Certain things like the threshold that Crown prosecutors need to operate under. Is there a reasonable likelihood of conviction here? That is important because if a prosecutor is dealing with a matter for which there is not a reasonable likelihood of conviction, it would be inappropriate for the prosecutor to continue on and sort of, try his or her luck, if you will, I guess, for lack of a better term. I think that we have, an obligation to the public to prosecute those cases that do have a reasonable likelihood of conviction for any number of reasons. Number one, the accused should not be forced to defend a case for which there is no evidence to support the allegations.
Hmm.
Um, the other thing is this an appropriate use of public funds? Right. We know our prosecutors and we know our courts are stressed already, and I would prefer that they focus on those cases that they believe are genuinely triable, and that there's a good likelihood of conviction, because those are the ones that will have the best evidence to support the charges that were laid. Um, you know, when it comes to consulting with the public, I do want to talk about some of the things that we do, because I think this is absolutely an important topic to bring up. As the Justice Department, we're typically seen in a way that deals to basically with the courts, with the jails, with the judges, and with the police officers and whatnot. And the fact of the matter is that I want this Justice Department to have a very different perception with the public. I want them to know that there are so many wonderful things that we do as well. That, of course, the safety of all Albertans and their families is always going to be my top priority, and in fact the top priority of this government. But we also look at some wonderful initiatives to help with dealing with things in our justice system and in our legal system that are uh, not what you would typically associate with a justice department. Things like the challenges, the stress, the anxiety of dealing with family issues. And I think this is important because, the impact on children and the impact on the families is something that we don't talk about enough. And so we're introducing a bunch of different initiatives, one of which includes a family justice strategy to help families deal with their problems at the very early onset in for example, a mediated approach. Can we have these families sit down and mediate with using somebody who the government provides to help address some of those very early issues, which maybe could be solved at the very beginning of a split or separation. What this does is it allows families to deal with things in a far less stressful environment. Going to court is incredibly stressful, even for a lawyer.
Yeah.
And I can't imagine somebody who's never been there isn't going to feel a lot of anxiety. Having it in a informal mediation session, I would say, is probably the most appropriate way of beginning this approach. Leaving the courts as a matter of last resort is something that I think that we're going to try and develop even further. In December, we launched our family justice strategy that's been rolled out in Edmonton and Calgary. I'm very much looking forward to expanding that across this province and allowing families to help deal with their issues. Look, we're not gonna do away with the problem of family splits and family breakups, but if I can affect the ability to make it as least intrusive as possible when it comes to dealing with issues of parenting and custody and access and support, whatever else might come up. I'm very much in favor of doing that. So I hope that when it comes to reaching out to the public and your question about what we're doing to help Albertans understand what the Justice Department really is, this is just one small drop in the bucket
Yeah.
in some things that we're developing over and above that typical association with crime and penalties and prosecutions and whatnot.
Yeah, I think like when if they put out in the news, somebody didn't their theft charge or mischief, it didn't go ahead because it just wasn't in the interests of the courts or whatever it might be. But when we see like there was a recent news on somebody who got out for child porn accusations, but also a documented criminal history of it, and sometimes things can't go ahead for Jordan decisions. Uh, I think it'd be nice if there was like a place where it was kind of explained as much as possible. I know everybody's kind of got their rights to privacy and different things, but I think that's just kind of what the public's like hungry for more in depth information. Kind of like the podcast. It's like everyone's kind of sick of just the headlines and the tweets and the shouting back and forth. It's like we want some content. We want some depth to this and explain to us, like educate us on why exactly are these decisions made the way they are. Um, for me, kind of one of those big components is getting right into the schools. So, university would be a good one, but maybe even high school, we start teaching people like this is how the whole system works. You're about to be an adult. Like you better get involved and get in the know. So I think that's something that everybody could do a better job on. Um, with the remainder of our time, I did want to ask a bit about the org crime side of things and gangs, just because that's kind of near and dear to me with where I work. But with all the stuff kind of going on right now, where they talk about foreign influence, there's the whole connection between geopolitics, outside governments, and local crime groups. Does that come across the province's desk a whole lot? Because I know the feds are kind of getting put through the ringer with this right now. But but where does that come in at the provincial level? How aware is the province of those things? And then what's kind of done at the provincial level for that?
Well, it would be absolutely right for me to say to you that uh, organized crime, gangs, and in fact cartels are looking to Canadian provinces to operate. We know that they are here, that they are trying to establish roots in the province of Alberta and elsewhere, and we're certainly very much apprised of the situation as it relates to the policing and justice efforts to make sure that they don't find safe place here in Alberta. I remember being interviewed for the Calgary Sun some time ago and talking to Rick Bell and saying that Alberta will never ever be a club med for organized crime. We will never ever give them an environment for them to operate in, and we will never make it peaceful for them to operate in this province. And that's exactly what I intend to do. I will dedicate every resource in my ministry to make this the most hostile province and the most uncomfortable place for any organized crime to operate. And that's sort of where the precursor to what led to some of the work that we did with our targeted Crown Prosecution Service. These are the folks that are going to be able to identify very quickly once they see names popping up over and over again. Wait a minute, there's something here that doesn't sound right. This individual newcomer, but we're seeing his or her name come up more and more often. Let's take a closer look at this. And the only way to do that is to make sure that the same people are prosecuting the same types of crimes in the same areas. We know from some of the discussions we've had with law enforcement in Calgary and Edmonton that some gangs are setting up in the various areas, and we've seen a lot of the issues with the Edmonton encampments. We've seen the encampments popping up at basically unprecedented rates up in Edmonton, where you're seeing these tents and these groups set up all over the city. And we were able to meet with Police Chief McPhee, and we learned very quickly that the gangs were using them as sort of open air drug markets. They were infiltrating the encampments. They were taking advantage of some of the most vulnerable people in society, and they were using their superior advantage through threat or otherwise to create an environment where people who were in these encampments were forced to depend on them for basic living. For example, access to the water fountain, access to pathways, access to bridges, or even staying in encampments altogether.
Well, I was gonna say, and what's funny, in the same kind of space, they're depending on it for those things, but also for protection. It's like,
Yeah, yeah,
I'm gonna protect
you
you,
know,
but I'm also gonna do harm to you if you don't pay your tax.
it's ridiculous how this has become transpired. And then we see the positions of the left wing agencies who are arguing that these are safe places for people. The shelters that we have in this province, the shelters that the government is supporting, are safe places for people who need a place to stay. And there's nobody on this planet that can convince me that living in an encampment that is being run by a gang is safer than being in a shelter here in this province. Um, we are very much aware of what is happening. We are very much aware of the attempts, and I can tell you that I have every available resource that the premier and this government has given me to combat that issue. And I don't think that we're going to let that transpire lightly. We're going to continue to chase them all across the province, all four corners, and make sure that there is no safe place or comfortable place for them to set up shop.
I appreciate the answer. So we're just coming up to the end of time. I want to give you a second just to say how people can follow you and your work, social media, specific websites, anything.
Absolutely. We maintain an active Facebook account, Mickey Amery, member of the Legislative Assembly of Alberta. I think it'll be pretty easy to find. Another thing that we do is we're active on Twitter. You can also reach me at Ministry of Justice at gov.ab.ca. And we do our best, despite the fact that we get thousands of emails, we do our best to try and respond to each and every one of them. You can call my office in Edmonton and speak to the office there for any questions that you might have. And most certainly, you can message us on Facebook or elsewhere, and we endeavor to, and we try very much to reply. In fact, I try to reply to a lot of the emails and the DMs that I get, and you might just get a response directly from me.
That's awesome. So yeah, we're just at the end of time. I want to say thanks for coming on. If you can hang on for 2 seconds, just offline, I'll say bye. I'll just remind everybody, just if they can, share, like, comment, The Quiet Professional, and we'll see you next time.
Thank you so much for having me. And the last thing that I want to say is this: the support and the follows on social media are very, very much appreciated. And I'm very grateful for those who do, because it gives me the opportunity to deliver my message directly to you
Hmm.
Typically, it goes to those who are following our social media pages at the very beginning. That's the first source of news, and I think it's the best source of news because you'll hear it right from me. So thank you all for listening to me, and looking very much, Nathan, to seeing you again and talking to you in this podcast again and again. We have some wonderful news developing, and I think that your viewers and your listeners would really appreciate hearing it.
Appreciate it very much, sir. We'll talk again.
Thank you.